Hey guys, Kirk here, and we are in day 21 of our 30-day drawing adventure, and I'm so glad you're back with me again today. I'm proud of you. You are sticking with this and making it work, and that's one of the most important things of all things to getting better at drawing. So, very proud of you. Today, you're just going to need something to draw with and something to draw on, and I may send you somewhere, so just know that ahead of time, but good to have you back, and we'll see you in a sec. Okay, so we are in where we're at in this whole series here is kind of digging into some more complex topics and areas of drawing that you kind of have to get into eventually if you're going to keep drawing. And it wouldn't be any kind of drawing series if I didn't at least address some of these things. But today we're going to talk about perspective. And I already mentioned yesterday that perspective is almost like a science, and or it has been turned into that. And it I could do an entire 30-day series just on perspective and not fully cover you know even really chip into all that you can learn and understand about perspective. And when I was in art school, I think our perspective like section or whatever it was in my drawing class was like maybe a month long. It may have been 3 weeks, but if I felt like it was a month long. It was a lot of learning, a lot of drawings, a lot of work. And so to try to think I'm going to, like, in a day here, give you a very good ability to really know what someone's talking about when they say perspective, that's just too much of a tall order. But what I do think I can give you, and I don't really find it many places, I don't know that I ever have. I've watched a lot of beginner perspective for beginner videos, and I've seen people talk about it in like a quick exposure sort of way. And I actually don't. I think what is usually available in those situations is not the most helpful information. Um, and I'm going to explain that, and I'm going to explain that, uh, with a piece of paper and a pencil and kind of show you what I mean. But um, I think largely perspective's been turned into a formula and a science and that is actually, and that's a thing, like you can learn the ins and outs of all these aspects of perspective and how to do it well as almost like a science. But I think leaning in that direction too heavily, which is what most videos do, even beginner videos, is a disservice to really understanding what perspective is at its base level. And I think getting that understanding of what perspective is probably way more helpful than learning how to do a specific type of perspective drawing. And you can be the judge of that, but I'm going to try to talk to you about the idea of what perspective is trying to, the science of perspective in drawing is trying to help you with and teach you, when I think maybe a broader understanding philosophically of perspective is more helpful actually for, especially for one lesson on perspective. And so I'm going to open up my sketchbook and we're going to start working through the idea of perspective in drawing, and I'm going to try to help you understand it before you ever learn how to do it in any specific situation. Sorry, lots of meaningless words. Let's draw. All right, here we are. Blank piece of paper and a pencil. The scariest thing. Not really, but I want to start this discussion about perspective, about just talking about the world we live in and how we view it. Perspective, the word itself, means like the position from which you see things. That's your perspective. It gets used like a lot in life, right? I have a perspective on the world, and it's influenced by the way I was brought up, where I live, all kinds of crazy factors. And other people that don't have those same viewpoints, that's a great way to say it, viewpoint, is because they come from another perspective. They come from a different angle or direction or upbringing or whatever. And it's the same with drawing. Perspective is representing on two dimensions whatever we see, or from the viewer's point of view, and what's the three dimensions we see, putting it in two dimensions on the paper so it's believable, or the canvas or whatever, and translating three dimension to two dimension in a believable way so that it looks like real life. And if you want it to look like real life, it's got to represent what someone would see in real life. And that's the viewer's perspective. And the drawer has to consider the viewer's perspective. And that's where the word perspective comes from. And I think as a disservice to what we're really trying to do, I'll say it a different way. I think the subject of perspective in drawing is a formula way to try to do what happens naturally in the world. And it's actually a limited understanding. It's like this is a really difficult thing to try to reproduce on paper. So here's a formula on how to do it. And that formula takes form in the form of 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. There's more than 3 point. And it's like people with good intentions of helping us understand what's happened, like how to draw something in what we see, have reduced what's really happening to this kind of simplistic 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. And right now, people that know drawing already, some of you are probably getting upset because 3 point perspective is not simplistic. Well, I'm going to show you that it actually is. It's very simplistic. And I don't think it's helpful all the time. I only think the discussion of like true, like classically taught perspective is only helpful for perspective drawings where you're doing it to practice and study perspective. I don't think it's helpful for just going out and drawing landscapes and architecture and drawing in life. A general, what I'm going to talk about today is helpful, but 1 point, 2 point, because guess what? Life does not exist in those forms. It just doesn't. That it does. That's a way to see it and understand it, but that is not as simplistic as it is. And let me explain to you why. I'm going to draw 1 point perspective. Says, everything's working towards a single vanishing point, which is on the horizon. The horizon's going out there, and there's this point on here, and now we have a box, and it is getting smaller and smaller, and it's going to this vanishing point. And if you want, you can draw from all four corners. I'm not using a ruler, and I have a very good reason for that. And now you can make that box a cube by just randomly picking a spot and connecting all four lines. My lines aren't straight, so that's why you're going to see. But then now you've got your three-dimensional, not perfect square, transparent box that is going to 1 point on the horizon. There's your box, and you can put that box anywhere, and it'll all go to. Let me just quickly draw another one. You can put those boxes anywhere, and they're going to go to that line. And then they say, okay, now 2 point perspective. 2 point perspective is going to be, I'm just doing this by comparison so that you can understand when you watch all these other videos about this is perspective. All right, we're going to draw a leading edge of the box, and that box is going to go top and bottom, and we're going to arbitrarily pick the width and distance of it, and we're going to go from those corners And now we have a 2-point perspective box. And those are vanishing points. And you can do that just like with 1 point anywhere. And then there's 3-point. And now we've got, I'm not going to draw it because there's a point down here in the boxes. It's like buildings, and they're getting bigger and smaller. But here's what all of that is kind of disregarding. When you look at the world, there are literally an infinite number of vanishing points. Everything you look at is getting smaller as it gets away from you. So if I draw a horizon line and I put, a box here and a box here and a box here, if there are more boxes going away from that box, moves away from me towards this, and it's going in this direction, then it's going to follow that vanishing point and go in that direction. But guess what? If there's a row of boxes, or let's do a train, okay? If there's a train and it's going on tracks to this vanishing point, it's going to follow that and get smaller and smaller towards it. But if the tracks go over here, it's going to follow that vanishing point and go further and further that direction. Or if it's a bicycle and it isn't on tracks, but it's going on a path, which is going way over here and it's starting here, it's going to get smaller and smaller as it goes over there. There are an infinite number of vanishing points. And guess what? They're not just on the horizon. If I have a string of birds and one is close and they're in a straight line and they're in a perfectly straight line and they get further and further away from me in a straight line, their vanishing point is going to be way up here. There are an infinite number of vanishing points in the world around you that things are getting smaller towards. If I look at a road, if I stand at an intersection of 6 roads all coming together, you've seen roads like that in Paris. Guess what? Down every one of those roads, let's see if I can even do this. I have a very high perspective on this. I should have drawn it more flat. On every one of these roads, the buildings, the cars, the people, everything's going to be getting smaller and smaller towards, it's because that road is going that direction. So perspective, this 1 point, 2 point, 3 point is really not helpful in everyday life because it only exists in like blocks of city buildings and where there's basically all the lines are going in 3 different directions. Then it's 3-point perspective. But the real world doesn't, it only works for geometric patterns like blocks of buildings or, these things that if you just go out and look how to draw perspective, it's just going to be a bunch of scenarios that are very rare in society. And so I don't feel, sure, it's helpful for a room if you draw the inside of a room because the walls all go in, I'll draw a room. It is helpful to know that there are vanishing points to a room and that different things are all going towards the same point. And, there's the corner. This ceiling lines have a different angle than these ceiling lines because they're working towards some point way out here and they're working towards some point way out here. I think it's more important for you to understand that anything that's getting further and further away from you is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And if it's in a straight line, then it's going to follow that pattern all the way out. Recently, I did a painting of some boats, a commission, an oil painting, and I generally used 3-point perspective. And the reason being is because from the viewer's point of view, everything was going away from me to a far point on the horizon, and the the docks and the boat sides of the boats and everything were all in the same line, the same angle. So that same angle is going to have the same vanishing point all the way back. But then the fronts of the boats, I don't know if I can draw this and do it any justice, but I'll show. I put the photo of the painting up on there. But these boats, the boats and the docks, all are going in the same direction, so they're all gonna go to the same vanishing point. But the horizontal lines, they're all going the same direction. They're going to go to two vanishing points way out on the sides because a boat way over on the right is going to be a lot smaller than the one right in front of me. And so there's this like, and then guess what? There's little boats way in the background on up on that painting. You should be able to see boats way in the background, way off to the right. They're not going to the either of those any of those three vanishing points because they're headed to their own vanishing point. They're out here in this direction. Okay, all this to say, I'm getting frustrated just because I feel like most perspective is like trying to help people do something which just almost never exists in real life unless your drawing professor assigns perspective or you want to do cool lettering that's like Star Wars coming out at you. Um, but if you're drawing from the real world, you just need to understand that anything in front of you is getting smaller and smaller as it gets away from you. And whatever direction that is, up, down, right, left, and straight in front of you is just, it's getting smaller as it goes away from you. And if it's in a straight line, you can represent that with those lines that all converge to a spot. But if one box or one train is going this way on tracks, it's going to get smaller in that direction. And if another train is coming, it's going to get smaller. These are like the worst trains in the world. It's going to get smaller in that direction. And those trains are going to hit each other. But I just, for the purposes of this one lesson on perspective, I simply have two things. One is perspective is way more complex than 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. It's infinite point. But second point I'm making for you today is that using your three rules of relationships of size and distance, angles, and shapes can overcome any perspective problems. I promise you. If you sit on a city street and you draw the buildings and you can see the street going away in the distance, you don't have to have a vanishing point drawn and follow a line where it's all leading. If you get the angle of all the roof lines and the buildings lined up, if you get your angles right, if you get your shapes right, if you get your distance, if this little building in the background is the right size compared to the one in the foreground, you got your city street. I keep drawing this like from a high perspective, but you got your buildings, and as long as um, you get your angles right, you don't need to know that because some buildings are gonna be a little taller, so they aren't gonna line up anyways, um, and so you just don't have to. You just work on those three things, and you don't have to stress about. I did that whole painting of the boats, which uses a very like strong sense of perspective, the big sky and all the stuff you can see in a really far distance, really without stressing about too much about the perspective of it. I just wanted to make sure it looked right, but I had to just know that everything is going away from me and getting smaller and smaller, and so that is really all you need to know for a 1 day lesson. I can teach all those like formulas, but unless you're drawing architecture in a city or a really strong perspective in a room, and you just don't want to figure out the angles, You don't need it. Like you just don't need to know all that perspective stuff. And I'm probably making a bunch of people mad right now, but you really don't. You just to know that everything is parallel lines are converging. They're always converging. So if there's four parallel lines on the edge of something, all facing the exact same direction, they are going to, as you go away from you, are going to converge. They're going to go to a point. But that's true in an infinite number of directions. All right, guys. I feel like I kind of just ranted a little bit there about perspective. Hopefully, it's a positive thing for you as you think about this. I think my biggest role was to, my goal was to encourage you that you don't have to learn the science of perspective. That's mostly for drawing perspective drawings. If you want to just draw what you see in the world, draw what you see. If there are, just make sure you draw what you see. If I'm drawing this room and these angles are coming down here, I need to find that angle and draw it. And I don't necessarily need to understand that all those lines are where the point is and that it's going there, as long as I get them looking like how they really look. Now, if you want to draw from your mind and not from real life or a photo, you will have to have established some vanishing points just so that it's believable. I mean, it's going to be really hard to just come up with and get it right without knowing where things are all headed to. But um, for the most part, you do not, unless you're getting assigned a perspective drawing, you do not need to know how to do the vanishing points and create them. You just need to draw what you see. And that's all that this series is going to get into it to teach you. And so I would like to prescribe for you and direct you to draw the inside of a room or some architecture. So, like a house, a building, or the inside of a room that has some straight lines. Basically, we're looking for non natural, not organic, but some artificial lines, basically. And draw something with some of those man-made lines, if you will, buildings, rooms, houses, and try to draw the angles that you see, and just make notes about how they're converging, how they might be converging. But I just think an understanding that everything is headed away from you and getting smaller is all you really need to know, and then drawing what you see to do most landscapes, most architecture, most drawings can be done with just that understanding, just realizing those simple things and working at drawing what you see. So uh, maybe I'll do a perspective series at some point, but that's really just such a very narrow thing. You don't need it. So there you go. Sorry if I made anybody upset that's really into perspective, but I think it's more needed for all the stuff that's out there. It's more needed for us just to understand the idea of what perspective is trying to capture than it is to learn how to do it. So there you go. There's your lesson for today. Go draw something, draw a room, draw a building with some lines, and see how that goes. And we'll see you right back here tomorrow as we continue to draw together.